Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Moms Can, Black Moms Society Community Town Hall Series. We are so happy to have you today with us for our Education Community Town Hall Series. This is the second installment of our Community Town Hall Series that we are doing for the election 2024 cycle and also for our moms. This is a town hall for moms by moms, and we are so happy to have you. Black Mom Society is a wellness practice that is here to provide the empowerment and upliftment for moms and also for our families, as you can hear in the background, my toddler. And we are so happy to have you here. And we will get started in just a few seconds. We are here with our lovely panel, Dr. Simpson, our moderator, Mrs. Ba, Miss Berry, Dr. Holloway, Miss Montgomery, and Mrs. Wright. And I will start by introducing our moderator, Dr. Simpson. So Dr. Simpson is a lifelong educator. She has worked in a number of roles in the schools, from teacher, learning specialist, and also school psychologist. With a Bachelor of Science, Master's, and a PhD from Howard University, a triple degree graduate and alumni, she has developed expertise in areas such as cognitive assessment, socio-emotional functioning, and trauma-informed care. Currently working in Maryland, Montgomery County Public Schools as a school psychologist, Toria collaborates with teachers, administrators, and families to create individualized intervention strategies to support students' academic and mental health needs. Additionally, Toria provides evidence-based counseling for concerns including anxiety, depression, and behavioral disorders. Toria has contributed to crisis response teams, managed student progress on IEPs, individual education plans, and 504 plans, and led professional development for staff on classroom management and trauma-informed practices. Thank you so much, Dr. Simpson, for this. She is the best moderator for this panel, having worked in different capacities, and can definitely lead us in this collaboration of our educators and mental health professionals. And with that being said, I will have her take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Green. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this very important town hall. As you see, we have all of our participants here in front of us. We will be having this in the town hall fashion, where we will be discussing topics that are really relevant to our children right now and information that parents need to know to help them advocate for their students in schools. So, without further ado, let's get to meet our participants. First, we have Mrs. Ba. She's a school psychologist, and she has particular interest in discussing learning disabilities, behavior management, social emotional learning, early childhood, and universal pre-K. Next, we have Ms. Lindsay Wright, who is a school counselor and a CEO founder of New Dreamers LLC, and she has interest in school-based mental health from a counseling perspective and parent advocacy. Welcome. Next, we have Mrs. Toya Montgomery, who is a special education coordinator, and an EDD candidate and education leadership policy at Bowie State University, and has interest in special education. Next, we have Mrs. Miriam Berry, who is a special education teacher and a parent of a child with autism. And last, but of course not least, we have Dr. Holloway, who is a school-based secondary school administrator and a podcaster with a special interest in rural education. So welcome to all of our panelists, and thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to hear all your knowledge on these topics that we'll be discussing. So first, I'm going to start with kind of just putting some topics out there for some specific people, but if you have any interest or any additional information about that topic, please feel free to join it. So our first topic, we're going to look at Supporting students with special education needs. So, looking at the role of special education in providing individualized support to students with learning disabilities and behavioral challenges. Some challenges faced by Black and Brown students in accessing these resources and strategies to help enhance their success. And I'm going to pose that prompt to Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson. So when we look at the community of Black and Brown students, we usually feel marginalized. And what we want to do is make sure that we are providing access to those resources or knowledge of the resources that exist. My first point is to encourage families to, one, go to the school, be partnership, be in collaboration with your school team. That's your first line of defense. You want to be in constant communication with your teachers, your counselors, your administration. And if there are problems, challenges, and barriers that they are being presented to you, you want to collaborate with them about, well, what works best for your individual child. Once the strategies are identified, encourage documentation. So if a strategy is being implemented or a strategy is being recommended, ask for documentation. Best practices 4 to 6 weeks, and then you want to know, how is it working? If it is working, then we want to make sure that we're continually doing so. If it's not working, you want to make sure that you're having, again, a collaboration of, okay, what's not working about it? And you want to continuously do that until the point when you have come to a realization that we need to now consider special education services. And then again, it is a collaboration, but what you want to do is make sure that strategies and supports are being implemented with fidelity, in collaboration with your team. Make sure that documentation is being provided and it's a constant feedback.
I like that you said intervention first and you didn't jump straight to special education. That is a very, very important part. Sometimes I know in schools, they like to say, oh, there's a problem in special education, where sometimes students just need an intervention, and that intervention could work. And I know working with school teams, sometimes school teams see like intervention as a way to get to special education. But no, it could be a full stop. Intervention works, we stop there. We know that now your child has the skills to do the things that we need them to do. So I really appreciate that.
Yes. And can I add on to something that you just said? So when we think of special education, you want to think of it as the last resort, not necessarily the first stop. You've gone through all the laters and you have documentation of all the previous things that have not worked. So now we're here. So when the team is talking about special education, it shouldn't be a Band-Aid that fixes the problem. It really should be, we've tried everything, nothing's working. So now we want to determine if there is individualized instruction that's required or if there is some type of disability.
Perfectly said. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to share on that topic? And if not, that's okay. We will go to the next topic. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. School-based mental health services. So the importance of integrating mental health services in school to support students' emotional well-being, identifying barriers to accessing mental health care within school settings, and how to foster a more inclusive environment. And I'm going to send that to Ms. Bob.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Simpson. So when it comes to school-based mental health, it definitely impacts all students, their ability to learn, interact socially, and then to also participate in school activities. The school plays a crucial role in children's lives. As we all know, we send our children to school, and the school is taking care of them for that long period of time. And so, that is an area where schools need to continue to foster that and support students of all cultures and all race. School-based mental health services typically include counselors, counseling, therapy. It could be crisis intervention, social emotional learning programs, and access to mental health professionals like the school psychologist, the counselors in the school, and also social workers. And when it comes to integrating that services, these services are increasingly being integrated, and it's simply in the school curriculum. Mental health programs and things have been integrated in the curriculum through any wellness programs that school has. positive behavior intervention support is also where that's integrated. And then, and it also is set to target mental health initiative to aim to create support school climate. You also mentioned that what are some of the barriers that others face? I do see that there are many cultures that kind of downplay mental health as well. So it becomes a little bit challenging in the for even the professionals to kind of support families because there's like a pushback. So it makes it difficult to kind of support students in that aspect. But that is one of the barriers that I have seen within our school setting as well. Did I miss anything part of the prompt?
Just fostering more inclusive environment. How do we do that?
Yeah. So with that, for I would say for families, it's very important to kind of know your child and like just be aware of, what and understand that as parents, you're sending your child to a different area. They're also getting information from other people. So there's a lot going on with kids. So it's very important to kind of work with your teachers, build a bond with them, and kind of work together to collaborate to support students overall. So then as parents are doing their part, and then the school's also doing their part to help build, to improve the student overall well-being.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do have a follow-up question for anybody on the panel. Have we seen an increase in mental health needs since the pandemic?
100%. 100%.
And I ask that because I don't want parents to think that like, oh, it's just my child. We have seen a major increase with the students' coping abilities since the pandemic.
Yeah, it has been very difficult. Go ahead, you're on mute, Dr. Hollow.
Yes. I was in schools and we say the pandemic. I just think that we had time to focus on the fact that mental health issues were occurring in our children. I was an elementary principal from 2017 to 2020, right before we broke in March of 2020. And the issues were through the roof then. It's just that I think society as a whole was just going and going, and we didn't have a moment to pause until the pandemic. And when we finally came back to school, people saw all the things that educators had actually started talking about probably around 2014, 2015-ish, honestly. And we finally had a moment to kind of talk openly without, I'll say, shame, because everybody was home and everybody was struggling in some way. So it came to the forefront. I think it was easier to say, children are dealing with anxiety, children are dealing with depression and so forth, because the adults were also dealing with it and coming to terms with it. So I think, although, COVID is blamed for a lot, it gave us an opportunity to finally advocate for more mental health services to be available in schools outside of school counselors. Some places call them guidance counselors. We call them school counselors. And so now there's and we're again, I'm on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. We actually have some of our agencies inside the school. So even when our students see agencies on the outside, if that agency has a provider that visits our school, they can go and get services right at school. So when we say school-based mental health, we really mean it. And the wait lists are still very, very long. So I just wanted to add that, I think some people hear COVID and they said it's exploded. I just think our attention was able to be on it more. But I do think students had started to struggle way before that, especially with the opioid epidemic that was occurring leading up to COVID.
Thank you for that. And yes, definitely, students have been struggling for what we've had a shortage for mental health providers, not just in school, but private practice for a while now, and that makes it even harder to sometimes deal with that. Like you said, the wait lists are just so long. And even as a school-based person, I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to get to this kid, but when and how can I really and get to them in an effective way, not just a check-in and be like, "You're good, I'm good, we're great," but to really kind of do some of the work. So, parents, we say all this to say that yes, there is an issue. Be mindful that it's complex, but that does not mean to not push forward if you know that your child needs help. It was very
And,
interesting. Oh, so I'm sorry. Who was?
oh no, go ahead. I'll wait.
I was just saying I had a professional development yesterday about school refusal, and a lot of that was, of course, talking about really it's anxiety or it's something else. It's not just that the child doesn't want to be there, and they were showing that it wasn't just America. It was China. It was all these students were having such a hard time just getting to the building because of these underlying issues that they were having that weren't really being addressed.
And I wanted to piggyback on this is Lindsay in regards to also moms who were with child during the pandemic. Um, we kind of want to talk about how the impact of I remember talking to a parent. Well, I was a mom also who was with child during COVID. And I remember the mom expressing the concern about how she feels that her anxiety about catching COVID while she was pregnant, because they really couldn't tell us anything, right? It was just don't catch COVID, right? So you had this sense of nervousness because no one could see your baby for 9 weeks. My son didn't see anybody until he was, I think, 4 or 5 months. So then that when he migrated into school, he was blessed to have someone keep him here at home for 2 years. But then when now he's 4, and it's time for him to go to school, and the social component was very difficult for him to transition from having one-on-one with someone that was in the home with him, then to go to daycare with 6 other children when he turned 2. So that part of it, our babies that are in pre-K 3, pre-K 4 are really struggling with that social component because they were not in school or were able to socialize with peers really until they were 2 years old. The social distancing, the can't see grandma, you can't go see your elder, all the things. And daycares really were very reluctant on opening until they were in, 2 and 3 years old, and then masking up, right? You really weren't able to see the light bulb moment of your students. Even for me, I'm in 9th grade. I have 9th grade now, but I didn't know their faces until now, right? You're still trying to figure out who they were because we wore masks. We had all of the, ways to prevent COVID. And now when they finally were able to take off their mask, you're like, wow, who is this? Who is this bright shining face? And I think that we need to be very careful when we're talking about not only when we were in COVID, but those babies like mine who are having that issue with the social component because he's comfortable with who he's comfortable with. And I know he struggled socially migrating into school and into daycare. So those students are going to be the ones that are going to 1st and 2nd grade. And it's great that they now have that social component.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery, you had something you want to share?
I was just going to add on when we shared that there was a shortage with service providers in school, encouraging parents and guardian not to give up. So if your school says they're going to do something and it didn't happen, follow up because schools have the best intention, but with the shortage, things do fall through the crack. So if they said they were going to do something, they do intend to do it, but with the shortage and the everyday, requirements of operating a school, they can forget. So just make sure that you follow up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And that is a perfect segue into our next topic, which is parental advocacy in education. So, how parents can effectively advocate for their children in navigating special education, school resources, and ensuring their rights are upheld, empowering parents to ask the right questions and be proactive in their children's educational journey. So, I'm going to ask this question to Dr. Holloway.
Okay, so we have been trying to get parents involved first so that they can be advocates. I think a hard part about parents advocating is there's a chasm there with knowledge, right? Most parents, a lot of parents operate on the what school was like for them. So without really knowing what school is like for their children, they sometimes operate on assumptions about what schools are doing, should be doing, are doing, can't do, and so forth. But our what I say for parent advocacy is the first step is knowing what's going on at the school to begin with, which starts with knowing who your child's teachers are in secondary, or who your child's teacher is in elementary, preschool grades, or what have you. Also looking at that information that comes from a school, i.e., newsletters, when there are phone calls, when there, most of us have social media or some sort of electronic communication now, being subscribed to whatever school information that there is, because the more you're informed, right, the better you can hold the school accountable for things. Knowing that report cards are always going to come out, progress report 4th week, report card 8 weeks. I always say to parents, every 4 weeks you should be getting some sort of notice about how your child is doing. And even before then, email, call, check in. I try to be very transparent as a principal. I Parents can call the school and ask for me. I've had conversations with parents, and I always say, I say, I want to listen to your concerns first. So, as a parent, call and know what the issue is, or what you think the issue is, lay it all out there, and then give the school a chance to respond. So, calling the school, talking to whoever it is, if your child's having a reading issue, who's the reading specialist, who's the ELA teacher, literacy coach, whatever you call it, interventionist. I think parents need to also talk to children beyond questions about, like, how was school today. Ask very specific questions around the
Mm-hmm.
learning that should have taken place, right? Ask to see, even on laptops, because sometimes they don't have textbooks anymore. Let me see what you did in Google Classroom or Schoology or what have you. So again, it's just more of that knowledge piece, so that then you can ask the right questions. Come to things that are sponsored by the school. I know we like moms with muffins, dads and donuts and stuff like that, but there's also education nights. If your child is going to a Title I school, they have to have reading engagement nights and math engagement nights and so forth. It's important to go to those, so that you know what your child should be learning, so you can know what those benchmarks are for learning as well. And I know there are a lot of special educators on here. Like, if your child's not hitting certain benchmarks, or you're getting test scores, don't just get the test scores and be like, oh, okay. Ask, what do they mean for my child? And there are people at the school that will sit down and tell you. So I just think for the advocacy piece, it starts with how you engage and understand what happens at the school. Even the cute things like board meetings. Board meetings tell you a lot about funding. They tell you where the money's going. Like, when people keep saying people making all this money, look at every board meeting. The CFO has to present what the budget looks like, and those numbers are up there for everybody. So just being very knowledgeable about processes, and being open to asking the questions. Schools are big on chain of command. That's a term you're going to always hear, right? Chain of command. So if there's a problem in the classroom, you start with the teacher. The teacher can't do it, then you go to maybe the specialist. If the specialist can't do it, then you go to an AP. You go to the AP, then you go to the principal. It's not necessarily a straight shot to, I'm calling the associate superintendent, I'm calling the superintendent, I'm calling the board office, because what they're going to do is call the school and say, you need to speak to Mr. or Ms. such and such. And then we're going to have a conversation that we didn't get to have. So I just believe that parents need to find out as much as they can, connect to the school, see all the things the school's putting out, go to meetings, go to parent nights, and just continuously expect certain things to happen. And when they don't happen, ask about them. So I don't know if I answered all the parts. I kind of wrapped it all together, but that's how I look at parent advocacy. And
That
it is
was
a collaborative.
really helpful. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was saying it, and it is a collaborative effort. Like, I don't like to say parents against schools. We can't do it without each other.
No, I definitely like how you approached it with knowing what's going on first. Before we can advocate, we got to know. We have back to school nights, and we know that everybody can't make everything, but there are multiple opportunities, especially in elementary school. You can get information. We have conferences, back to school nights, like you said, specialty nights for, we had a Hispanic Heritage Month night, all kinds of nights where you can get to know the people that are working with your children, get to hear about what they're learning about, get to see their learning environment. That's important too.
Very.
Where they're learning. But also, I would like to say to parents that if you have to have a meeting or you would like to have a meeting with someone, guess what? We have virtual options now.
Yes.
It makes it so much easier.
Yes.
You don't have to leave your job and drive 30 minutes to get to the school, then drive 30 minutes back. You can be on the computer. That is an option that I think is really one of the biggest benefits we got from COVID. So definitely you can ask for that. Like, is there a virtual option? Can I meet with these people, the teacher and assistant principal or somebody? So,
and I just
go ahead.
Just emphasizing again for any parents that are watching, if your school says they are Title I, there's a lot of stuff that should be available, that's offered from the school. And now in Maryland, if you're in a Maryland school that has the designation of a community school, through concentration of poverty grant funds, you should be looking for different kinds of opportunities, and so forth, to have input into what's going on around programming at the school.
Definitely. Even PTA, joining that, seeing what's going on. But our viewers, I did just want to stop and take a second to just remind you, if you have questions, please put them in the comments section, so I can bring them up to our panelists and we can answer your questions.
Dr. Simpson, I wanted to add on to a point Dr. Holloway made. So Dr. Holloway mentioned progress reports. If you have a student that has an IEP, every quarter when the report card comes out, you should get a report card. They're called progress reports, that reports on the progress that are outlined, the objectives that your IEP says. So you shouldn't go a whole year and not hear anything. You really should be getting reports. When the report grade comes out, you should be getting a report card for your IEP. And if you have not, first line is your case manager, your student's case manager. And then if you don't hear from your case manager, then when we talk about chain of command, whoever the special education coordinator is. And the IEP is a living document. So if you feel that it's not working at any point, you can request, can we have a meeting to talk about this? Because it can be amended. You don't have to wait until that annual date. I just wanted to elevate that point.
That is a wonderful point, and thank you for elevating that, because that is accurate. Very much so.
Just to add a little bit, even for families who do not, students don't have an IEP, or so to speak, like, know your teacher. Like, make sure that you are friends, like you have an open communication with their teacher, that every little thing she will let you know about your child. If it's weekly or every 2 weeks, you tell her, give me an update. She will, the teacher will be able to do that. But if you don't have that connection, then you're going to be somewhat out of the loop. So just keep close, communication with teachers.
And a lot of school districts I know have apps that they use. Montgomery County uses Remind app, but different schools use different apps where they can communicate with their classes. So as Dr. Holloway was saying, be subscribed to whatever the school is using. So if they're using Remind and the classroom is using something additional, please get both of those so that you know what's going on, largely in the county, but also in your school and your students' class. So that is really, really helpful. And thank you all for elevating all of those important points. So our next topic will be exploring is book banning and curriculum censorship. So the impact of book banning and curriculum censorship on education and critical thinking. the importance of preserving diverse perspectives in educational materials, and the role of parents and educators in resisting censorship. So I'm going to pose this topic to Ms. Wright.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to make sure that when we speak on book banning, I'm not really for certain that parents may know what that even means. I'm very being a school counselor, my mom was a principal. So when we talk about anything in regards to book banning, I don't think that parents necessarily even know what that means, and that certain things are banned from the curriculum or topics that we can't even talk about. So I really feel as though as a counselor, I'm an open book. So I'm able to not necessarily, there is no topic offhand for me. But in regards to classroom rigor and classroom content, there are certain things that teachers are very afraid to talk about and to discuss, right? So I really feel that when we're talking about book banning and topics that are sensitive to parents, to even know that their child is not even getting in the classroom. So when we talk about, for me as a school counselor, when we're talking about students that have LGBT, are part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? As a ninth grade counselor and or in elementary school, we're not talking about those sensitive topics. We're not talking about why those conversations are not talked about in the classroom. So then, of course, they call the school counselor, hey, can you talk about this topic, even though it's something they should outline in their curriculum and regarding being inclusive. So I'm not sure who you I was a partner with on this topic. I don't know if somebody wanted to add. I think I see somebody's hand up. Was it someone else? No? Okay. So I think that, well, I know that this is a very sensitive topic in regards to what we are able to say and what we're not able to say. The curriculum in various counties is very different. I have a student here in Charles County. My daughter's in Charles. I'm in PG. And my son is in another county, right? We're all over the place. But the curriculum is very different, and how teachers talk to certain topics and how they talk about those topics, depending on the teacher, it's very easy for that topic to talk. We are able to talk about that topic. So if it's about being a Black and brown baby in a such and such setting, it's easier. It flows different, right? But when we're talking about LGBT plus, BTQ plus, sexual, with the we are banned now from even talking about having sex education classes. There are certain things that we are not able to even talk about in the school setting. The PE teacher now calls in a school counselor, even though it's in the curriculum to talk about, it is now not a topic in which we can discuss out loud. So I don't think parents even understand that there are certain things their child is not able to be privy to in the school setting.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And it varies and differs between counties and states.
Yes.
For sure. So some states are much more restrictive about which books are available in the library for your students.
Yes.
So maybe it's My Angel News, I Know What a Cage Bird Sings. They might, if somebody brings a objection against a book, then the board can look at the book and determine if it's appropriate for students in their district or their county and remove it from the library or keep it in. So yes, it's very important to know what your school and your district is doing at this district level, because even in Montgomery County, I know that you have to have book readers. So like somebody reads the book and then they have to write up something and say this is what the book is about, so somebody reviews it. As a school psychologist, I do not go through that because I'm like, my office is not a classroom.
Correct.
In the office, I have my materials because this is what's socially, emotionally appropriate or whatever the topics are that I'm dealing with. But yes, it's definitely parents and each curriculum. I know we just got a new curriculum this year for reading. Curriculums, when they're written for the general population. So there might not be any Black or brown kids. And it's incumbent upon the teachers teaching to then infuse the curriculum with literature, with diverse students, so that all their students are seen in the curriculum. So parents, please be mindful of what is being what materials are being used to instruct your children, because it definitely shapes their viewpoints.
Correct.
Thank you. And so on to our next topic, which is supporting neurodivergent and special education students in special education. So we're discussing best practices for supporting students with autism and other neurodivergent learners in the classroom. So highlighting individualized strategies that foster academic growth, social emotional development, and inclusion within the school environment. And I'm going to pose this topic to Ms. Berry.
Hey. So, as we were concluding the previous topic, I reached over and grabbed a book that one of my instructor had us read for one of our the classes. I think it was called teaching diverse populations, something of that nature. And then that book had different topics from science and how Black and brown individuals contributed to the field. I talked about the medical field and a little bit of how some populations, mostly Black population, don't really like to go to hospitals because of the Tuskegee experiment, things of that nature. But then I thought that book was very interesting, and it addresses also aspects of the LGBTQ plus community. Anyway, that's a sidebar. To address the question, so I'm just gonna preface this by saying that I am the baby of the bunch. This is my 3rd year in the field, but I did have about 7 years of personal experience because I've been in my own set of IEP meetings for 7 years because my son is now 11. So I am on both sides of this topic. So when we talk about neurodivergent students, the terminology neurodivergence, I wanted to mention that it came about to emphasize the fact that differences are not viewed as deficit. And when we talk about neurodiversity in the classroom, it's basically to make sure that everybody learns differently, and therefore we need to cater instruction to make sure that everybody can understand the lessons that are being provided. So neurodiversity or neurodivergent students are typically those with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, sensory processing differences. And so those students benefit from individualized support, understanding, and proactive strategies. I would add patience. So in terms of the individualized instruction, IEPs and 504 plans are in place to make sure that those students who have specific needs are addressed. And then when we talk about advocacy, I appreciated that component in our town hall because parents need to know the process for special education. It's not that all students need special education. However, if we go through the tiers, which are 3 tiers, tier 1 is where we try to make sure that all students are monitored. And then if additional support is needed, then the tier 2 is there to make sure that those students get what they need. And it's usually from a certain time period, usually 6 weeks, so that we can see if there is a response to the interventions that are in place. And then if need be, and we still need parental consent. So schools cannot do anything unless the parent is on board. So I appreciated also the conversation about collaboration because everybody needs to be on the same page. And that's the main thing. What it looks like in the classroom for me, I wanted to mention that. So, and for IEPs, I've written a set of IEPs where I had to add my own verbiage from interacting with the student. What will make the goal attainable? It could be with a graphic organizer, because that person happened to be very visual, or it could be with the use of a calculator. Some students have a multiplication chart, but they challenge themselves, and they're like, "No, I don't need a calculator. Let me try it myself." And then this speaks to their I guess in my education courses, they talk about the zone of proximal development. Basically, give them tasks that are not too easy and not too challenging either, but stretching them a little bit to see what they can do on their own. Another thing for the classroom to support neurodivergent students, I would say a flexible learning environment. I have a set of students who are not identified, but I can tell that they just need to move, right? So sensory friendly environments, providing breaks for everybody so that we're not singling out one particular student. There's this one student that is always the one to pass out pencils. There's another one who probably prefers to do things manually. So if there's a lesson that we're doing in class, I will take it upon myself to create the same lesson on your pod, go on the apps like Class Dojo, put the code in the chat for parents. Hey, here's an activity that your child can do at home, so that we can really be flexible and make sure that all students get a chance to complete the lessons or participate in what's being taught. Another thing, clear and consistent routines. So what it looks like for me, my lessons look exactly the same way. There's a do now, and then it's two-sided. There's a do now, there's an activity. On the back, we use the 5 E's. So we elaborate, we explain, and the exit ticket is always at the bottom. So some students who may be used to that format, it makes it easy for them to know what to anticipate, and then they're more comfortable. There's one student in my class, of course, no names, Spanish speaking student. And another thing that I learned that we have to do is to learn how to use the browsers. There are 3 dots there where you can click it, it'll say translate, and you can translate the information in Spanish. After I did that, he goes, oh, no puedo leer en español también, which means, oh, I can't read in Spanish either. So at that point, you have to improvise. So I flipped it back to English. Then I said, wait, no, put it back in Spanish, read it out, even though I don't understand what I'm saying, so that he knows what he's supposed to do. And that seems to work, because I literally said, la tabla de whatever it was. And he's like, okay. And he said, oh, you got to multiply. Yes, the multiply. And he told me exactly what to do. So for that particular student, it was a language barrier that prevented him from accessing the lesson. He did that on purpose, because he was very quiet the entire time. But all this to say that, learning the technology too in the classroom will be instrumental in delivering lessons for students who might be neurodivergent. Excuse me. Thank you. What else did I want to add? I think, clear communication is another thing to support neurodivergent students. And then what it looks like for me is, once we launch an activity, for example, I can make sure that everybody gets started, and then I go to the students who I know may need a repetition, or making sure that they understand too what they're supposed to do. And I'm very direct too. Do you know what we're doing? And then they'll tell me, because I've built that rapport. They can honestly tell me, yes, I know what I'm doing, or I really don't get it. And at that point, I know where they are, and then I can support them with the lesson. Last point, which is maybe twofold: teacher training, because I've made use of the professional developments offered by the district, because I'm a DCPS employee. That's where I learned a lot about assistive technology, the language line, which I didn't really know were a thing, and then the collaboration again with the families and service providers, collaborating with them and seeing what goals they're working on, and seeing how it can be translated in the classroom. So there are some points that I was thinking about, and I took some notes too, because I wanted to make sure I touch on everything. Anybody else can chime in if they feel like I missed something here. And I apologize for my son.
You're a working mother. It's okay. This is what happens.
Yes, it does. A little too often, but yes.
Thank you for that. I think we're going to kind of circle back in one of the other topics to some more of this stuff. So thank you for your input. Because the next topic we're going to discuss is overcoming barriers to special education. So addressing some of the common challenges families may face in accessing special education services, particularly in underserved or under-resourced communities, and maybe provide some actionable solutions to parents. So we like to talk about what can be done, what should be done step by step, kind of. And this is open to all the panelists.
I think I liked how Miss Berry did that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And if you think of tier 3 really as the point where you're getting to special education, so there should be other levels. So your first step, if one thinks that there is some type of concerns, come to your school team, have a conversation, emphasize that you would like either multiple teachers represented, or if they are not being able to be represented, their report that captures strengths as well as areas of concerns. And then as a team, asked for strategies that can be implemented to support your child. You want to make sure that it is done with fidelity, and you don't want 100 strategies. If I can't read, you shouldn't be giving me a strategy about how to write. So you want to make sure that the strategy is directly aligned with the need. One resource that can be used, I don't know if this is out of turn because I know we're on YouTube, but it's a big, thick red book called Prim. It actually has the Prim manual. It has outlines for every single strategy, everything from anything that you can think of that's a concern. It outlines what supports could be used. You want to make sure your team, including you and the teachers, decide what is the problem. Okay, well, what is the strategy that we're going to use for that problem? Pick maybe 3 to 5 strategies, and then pick a time frame when you're going to come back. And then you come back to that table and you say, okay, I want documentation on what worked and what didn't work. If there's stuff work, then it's okay. Okay, so then let's look at the things that are not working, and then continue to do that in a process. If you realize you've done this for an extended period of time and it's not working, then you want to ask your team, can we look at going to an EMT, where it's a more formalized process, and going through, I don't know, I know different counties call it different things, but maybe like a kid talk process, MTSS. But we're now in a tier 2 process where it's getting more specific. We're being more intentional with the supports that we're providing. We might decide, okay, they might need a reading intervention class, or if there's a resource class in the building, so they might have that resource class built into their schedule. And then, like we did in tier 1, what's the problem? What's a specific strategy that we're going to align to it, and then document it, pick a date when we're going to come back to talk about what worked, what didn't work. And then if it's not working, that's when at tier 3, then you want to say, okay, we've tried all these things. Now we want to determine, is there really a disability?
Can I, and I just want to continue that conversation, and Toyin does a great job of talking about the steps you go through, like the tier 1, making sure we've done all the interventions. And there's so many acronyms that we use in education that mean the same thing, but so many teams that review data and so forth. I've been a IEP chairperson for 8 years now. So I want to speak to, because I think some of the question was, what are some of the barriers to accessing maybe special education services or whatever. As an IEP chairperson, and for parents who are concerned or considering that step, we're going to talk about attendance and the impact that attendance may have had on your child's progress, right? So if you have a child that has not come to school a lot, every year they're chronically absent or whatever, the discussion is going to be around attendance. If you have, moved a child in and out of schools several times, and this is not a judgment thing, but if you've been in one county for 3 months, and then you move and you're somewhere else for 6 months, and then you move at the end of the year somewhere else, and then we're going to talk about the continuity of school programming, because there hasn't been a chance to really for a child to access actual curriculum that's continuous for us to make a judgment call about any of that. People oftentimes will get the doctor, and doctors love writing, and I'm talking about medical doctors, love writing a letter to the school saying, I think such and such should have an IEP or a 504. Those are not the same thing. But just because, and parents need to know, just because a doctor says the child has ADHD, the child is just because Kennedy Krieger has said that they are a student with autism, just because, whatever these other providers are that say that there's something, we have to look at the educational impact. And sometimes parents get really frustrated when they're like, well, the doctor said that there's something wrong with them. And we're like, well, what we see in school is completely different, you
Mhm.
know. So I just, not that we can't necessarily go through a process, but I think parents need to prepare themselves for what the conversation will be like when you're talking about accessing special education services. Because and we just had this conversation in my school the other day. You're now, we have to take seriously the labeling of a child as a student with an IEP.
Yes.
This is something that will follow that child possibly until they are 21 years old, depending on when they start with one. So we have to look at all those things. It is not, and I always tell parents, and I in conversations with parents and teachers, if your answer is my kid just needs help, the word help is nowhere in any of the federal guidelines or anything for these special 504s or for IEP. So just asking for help is not necessarily indicative of needing specially designed instruction. So you need, again, have the school go through the interventions that Toyin has talked about with 4 to 6. She said that before, 4 to 6 weeks. Let's see if 3 to 5 strategies for 4 to 6 weeks. Let's see how they impact your child. Make sure your child is here for those 4 to 6 weeks, right? Not 3 days out of those 4 to 6 weeks and then say they didn't work. So I'm often very realistic about how I approach things. I always say, we can, all these processes are transparent. They really are. And sometimes our patience and our frustration makes us feel like they're not, but they are very transparent. Like, there are things that you're going to be asked to do. There are things that you're going to be asked to know. There are processes that we have that may work, but we need that child to be in school. And we need the child to have stable, I guess, what do we always say? What is the one?
Consistent, like, educational
Was
opportunity.
it Maslow before Blooms or whatever? They need to make sure they have all their regular needs taken care of so that they can then get to the academic piece. Because if it was housing that was the problem, if you have like stable housing, sometimes we see things clear up just like that. The kid feels safe, there's a good routine, and we're good to go. So yes, there are instances where there is some sort of disability that impacts a child's schooling, but there are other things that we have to talk about if we're being transparent through that process.
Yeah, Dr. Holloway, thank you very much. I was going to say, yeah, we have exclusionary factors to special education. If certain things are occurring, we cannot say it is that the child has a disability.
Mm-hmm.
We have to say, or we have to kind of control for those, just like they didn't have access to education, whether you were moving around or they weren't here or whatever it is. It's a language thing because they speak a different language. They learned how to speak a different language before English. And so now they're learning English, and can we penalize them for now being a second language learner? We cannot. We cannot. So there are exclusionary factors that if we see these things, I'm so sorry, they cannot get IEP and they cannot be a special education student because we have to control for those factors first.
One quick thing I want to add, if that's okay. And if it's not attendance, I will speak on what our experience was. It was basically he was already on speech when he was 3, and then the speech therapist said, "Well, there's something else," and I think legally she cannot suggest autism. But then there was a school psychologist on the call, and then the teacher was saying, "Well, he's inappropriately using materials in the classroom." And then we said, "Well, maybe he needs occupational therapy." And then the school psychologist said, "Well, how are his grades?" Well, his grades he's fine with he's basically whatever you're describing is not impacting his academics. So we can't really say anything. And he was there every day. So it's really a collaborative effort to figure out what it is, what the child needs, and how do we move forward. So the school psychologist said, "Well, I can't sign up for this because did you try any interventions?" The answer was no. So she sent everybody back. Let's move back again in about 6 weeks, and let's decide what we do next.
Yeah.
As most parents, we know our child. He climbed into the dressing chest thingy. He probably did. I'll be the parent that say, yeah, he probably did. He threw the letters out the window. He probably did. But at that point, I was able to make a conscious decision. Well, myself and his father, we just went ahead and gave consent for the evaluation, and that's how we ended up having an IEP. But then he's getting his services under the classification of autism. So his grades are still fine, but because of the speech, he doesn't have reading goals. But he doesn't have math goals, but he has reading goals. So just wanted to put that in for some parents who may be nervous about the process. You know your child. You will know if your child needs the extra support, and if he does, then go ahead and do it.
Well, that's your little
But
intern back
yeah.
there. See,
Right. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that. First, I want to commend you, Miss Berry, on being a parent is hard enough, right? But then when you have to be the advocate and the parent and ensuring that your child gets their needs met, it's a whole nother level, right? So I think, well, I know for a fact that you have to be very honest. When I sit at the table with parents, that's my tiny human in the back, intern is in the background. I have a 17-year-old human and a 3-year-old. So you may hear something scream, but I'm not for certain. However, you have to be very, very honest. And I think that that's the part where parents falter. They don't want to be honest in regards to, like, my child is doing this. This is happening at home. I'm also seeing it at school. But if you can just kind of tell me what to do when I'm seeing these things at home and bridging that gap between school and community, right? So if at home you're doing a 30-second timeout break, then yes, ask Malik. If you're doing a 30-second timeout break, then maybe is it working at home? No, it's not. Okay, well at school we're doing it this way. Okay, so at home it works if we do it this way, right? So I think I need you to wait and I need you to stop. So if it works for you to say that in school, it has to be consistent. There has to be some consistency between school and the interventions that are happening at home. Because if you're doing two different things, it is going to be a mess, right? So if I'm saying you're getting a 30-second break, at home, I want to know, teacher, if the 30-second break is working, I want to make sure I'm doing that at home. And the reason why I'm saying that with my 7-year-old, that was a major issue for her when she was in first grade. The interventions that we were doing at home were not matching what we were doing at school. So she was very confused. She became very upset. She was looking at me like, that's not what we're doing at school. My teacher's allowing me to do this. At home, they're telling me to do that. So now I'm confused on what rule to follow. And of course, because she loves her teacher and she wants to make sure she's doing the right thing, she will often go with what her teacher said, right? Well, my teacher told me to do this, this, and this. And I was wrong. And I'm like, no, baby, I think we need to do it this way. But this year, she has a dynamic third grade teacher. We are communicating constantly, and we're able to connect the dots in regards to at school, she's doing this, and at home, you should be doing this, right? And then as a parent, if you don't have a clue as to what the teacher is telling you to do, it is your responsibility to say, teacher, I don't know what frequent breaks mean. I don't know when you say, hey, my child needs this intervention at school. What can I do to make it look like that at home? So if it's a chart, we need to make sure that we are consistent, because I know for a fact that my 8-year-old thrives on consistency. If she's doing it frequently and it's at school and home, we're great. But if she sees that the teacher and I are doing this and we're not on the same page, she's going to use it to her advantage every time. So it is so important that you are speaking to each other as if you are a family. Because if you already know, if mom talks to dad and dad says this, and then mom says I can have the juice, and mom says I gotta have water, they're gonna try to mix water and juice together, right? So we want to make sure that we're not doing science experiments. Okay, so that is my caveat. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
that is a very descriptive analogy. We appreciate that. But we did have a question from our comment section. A participant asks, can you please elaborate on the steps to monitor child progress when teacher brings up concerns with their child? And I might go back to Ms. Montgomery because you have such a great way of kind of elaborate. I mean, anybody, but you have a great way of explaining that.
Sure. So the first thing you want to do is ask specifically, like Ms. Wright said, what is the concern? So is it that my student has difficulty with multiplication, they have difficulty completing the work, they have difficulty being seated in the class, they have difficulty coming to class on time? Like, ask the teacher what specifically is the area of concern. Then if it's one teacher, then it's possible at a secondary level, it might be that one teacher, and dig down deeper if, personality wise, teaching style, as opposed to if it's across multiple classes. If it's across multiple classes, then you want to extend an offer for a parent-teacher meeting where you can bring in other stakeholders. You want all the teachers' input. You want the counselor. If there's a team lead, an administrator. So now it's a group conversation because it's happening in more than one place. And then at that table, you want to hear what are the not just concerns, because the strengths also help you to determine what strategies can be put in place. So you want them to be specific. What things are my child really good at? What are their strengths? Because if my child is artistic, that could be something that could benefit them in the classroom and can help with the areas of concern. So you don't want to just hear the concerns. You want to also hear, so what are they good at? And then, okay, what are the areas of concerns? And then as a team, let's decide what 3 or 5 things are the higher barriers or the most things that are preventing that success in the classroom. And when we can drill down on those 3 to 5 things, then you want to have a strategy that matches those 3 to 5 things. So if your child is having difficulty with sitting still in the classroom, okay, can you offer my child an opportunity to stand in the back instead of sitting down? Can you offer my child an opportunity to take a structured break? So whatever the strategies are, it should specifically match the concerns. And then at that meeting, you want to ask, okay, how long are we going to document this? Is it going to be 4 weeks? Is it going to be 6 weeks? You can do 8 weeks, depending on how high needs the concerns are. And then at that meeting, you want them to provide you with the time frame, and then you want to ask for updates. So it could either be in intermittent, or it can be, okay, can I get an update at that meeting? But you want to make sure that you agree on the next time that you're going to come. And then at that next meeting, okay, let's talk about what worked with the strategy and what didn't work. If there are things that are working, okay, so then we've addressed the concerns. Then you want to look at, are there any other concerns? If the strategies weren't successful, that's okay. Okay, so now we need to consider additional supports. And as a team, you can decide what resources. So it's just a continuous collaborative process that really and truly all the stakeholders at your school should be a part of. It shouldn't just be you trying to decide, how can I fix my child? It really should be a collaborative effort. And I wanted to elevate one thing because we were talking about process. If there's a mention of an IEP process, you want to make sure you find out, okay, what data supports that we are at this point. Has there been other things that's happened? Because in itself, the IEP process can take 120 days. From the time that you say, I want to test my child, or the team says we're going to go to testing, to the time that the IEP is developed and implemented, it's at minimum 120 days. It's 180 days in the school year. So are you telling me that we're putting things on pause this entire time that this process is going on? So just keeping that in mind as well.
And can I add and I don't know how involved the Miss Barry's question was, but some simple things with progress monitoring and some language. Again, I like to educate parents so they can sound like educators too. If it's academics and the teacher has brought up the concern, your first go-to is the grade book, right? So make sure that you have, and a lot of school districts are using Power School or whatever that grade book is. If it's electronic, which I think everybody is at this point, make sure you're connected to that to see for yourself. No policy around grades. For example, in our district, you have to have a minimum of 9 grades per quarter. So if it's week 4 and you've seen 1 grade in your child's in the grade book for that teacher, your question is then, when will you be adding more grades, right? How often do you do grades in the grade book? Because I am monitoring my child's progress, and also ask to see, you know, again, because a lot of things are done electronically, and even I have problems navigating. When you tell me Schoology, I'm like, it's not even like I'm a principal anymore. You say Schoology, and I've never been to school for anything ever in my life. But you asked about formative assessment, so learn the teacher talk. You ask about what kind of formative assessments do you use in your classroom, and which are like the everyday checks. Some people use exit tickets. Are teachers doing tracking? Are they doing observational notes, anecdotal notes while kids are reading, whatever the grade level is? And also summative. Summative means, how do you know what they're learning after some unit of time? So just again, when that teacher brings up the concern, make sure the teacher comes with her stuff or his stuff as well. Like, you have a concern, but I'm not seeing, you know, I don't have enough evidence to be on the same page with your concern. So, because I'm just going to be honest, we do have educators that are not doing the things. It was so exciting hearing Miss Barry talk about all these things she puts in place, but there are some people that aren't. I'm not going to sit up here and say that everybody is a perfect teacher every single day. There are some people who aren't putting grades in, and so parents have no clue, but they want to complain about the child not doing well. And so again, if we're talking about partnership and collaboration, schools need to be doing what they're supposed to do. Parents, arm yourself to know, so that you can hold the school accountable and y'all can work together. And I love Miss Wright's, like, she was talking about collaboration and partnership. Like, we married right now. We have to be, we need to be, if we're not on the exact same page, we need to at least be in the same chapter on what we're doing with the child. So I would just say that to parents as far as progress monitoring. Know the language. Formative assessment, which is how you check each day that they're learning. Summative assessment, which is, what do you know about my child's learning with standards by the end of a unit? And just making sure that you know the grading policy, because I know we signed those syllabus papers in August and September at like 10:30 at night, because we forgot, and we just need to hurry up so that you can turn that into your teacher. So I'm just gonna keep it real. Educator parent, keeping it real. Like, girl, just give me that paper so I can sign it. I don't know when the tests start, how the grading categories are, but just get that paper in. So just trying to come at it from from all angles.
And just to piggyback on what you were saying, Dr. Holloway, I think that parents have to take it in chunks, right? And I think that sometimes we, with the spirit weeks and all this stuff that comes through email, a lot of the small writing is, we have an already night, right? Or we're having this night, or we're having this night, right? But I don't think that there's enough conversation about how we're going to talk about, how do I test or get support for my child, right? Those nights aren't happening as frequently as they should. We are oftentimes having so many amazing nights about already testing, how to improve MCAP, how to do these things. But from within New Dreamer, we help break that in chunks, right? First quarter, you should be looking at these things, just these 3 things. Second quarter, you should be looking at these assessments. What does it look like? Do you understand what already means? Do you understand when Dr. Holloway tells you to know the knowledge, know the people at the table? Do you know who's at the table? Do you know what they service for you? Do you know that Dr. Holloway is not the first person that you need to reach out to? Do you know these things? Because I know that parents want to know. I don't know if they don't know how to know what they want to know. I oftentimes tell them, you have all right to know, but do you know exactly when they're sitting across from you, when they say your child is scoring low on this assessment, do you take it and walk off and sign off on it? Or do you really want to know those minute micro details as to, maybe, I don't know, hey, I don't know what this math looks like, right? And teachers need to be equipped to know it's not a gotcha. It could be a thing as a parent. I just don't understand, right? I don't know what I'm doing. And it needs to be a space of vulnerability for
Yeah.
parents to feel that they can say, I don't have a clue as to what you're saying. And that is why parent engagement is so low, because parents sit at the table and they don't know, and they're already on defense mode. And then they're upset because they feel like you said their child can't learn. And then you walk off and you're upset and you're never coming back to a parent teacher conference ever again, right? So it's about how we frame and how we say things to our parents, that what we want to engage them where they're able to come back and understand exactly what Dr. Simpson is saying, or what Dr. Holloway is saying, or Miss Montgomery is saying at the table. Because if you don't know what's being said and you walk off with the attitude and you never come back, then we have lost not only a child, but we've also lost that community partner with that parent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. We also have another Facebook question from Amani Lewis. What if you feel your child needs a one-to-one in class, but the school says they don't want the child to rely on one staff member only and prefer to add additional staff support in the class? And that's for anyone on the panel.
As somebody who has to staff a school, I understand why they're saying the one-on-one, the person, because that person can be here for 2, 3 weeks and decide they don't want to be here. And then if the child has started to become accustomed to having and relying on that person, then we may have another period of adjustment to happen. So you can have a lot of times, if an IEP says that the student receives one-on-one support or what have you, um, it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a specific person for that reason. A lot of times, like we can't promise that Miss Wright's gonna be here every single day for your child. But your child, we want them here every day and going to class. So I would say that the addition of different staff members, if I'm answering the question correctly, is so the child will always have support and will always and we're introduced to multiple people, so that if there is a concern, there's not this adjustment period that may set a child back. I don't know how severe the needs are, but it takes a lot of time for kids to warm up and trust people. And if they've only warmed up to one person, when that person is not there, like we have a IA that's retiring. She's been there for almost 20 years, but she's retiring on November 1st. And
Mm.
had we only had her with one of those students that is in our intensive supports room, we'd be nervous right now because that sudden loss, because Miss that IA is not going to come back after retirement just to ease her way out of that child's life, right? So we make sure that our students who do have intensive needs and need one-on-ones have a person that they a person at a time or whatever in classrooms, but we want to acclimate them to many different people. And that's just the nature of where we are with staffing in buildings and schools right now.
Can I add to?
Yes.
I think as we talk about the diversity of the student population, with and knowing that we have neurodivergent students too in the classroom, I think even exposing them to different staff will help them with their social emotional needs. Mine is transition is a word that we we try to avoid because we don't do well with transitions. So every chance I get, I tell them ahead of time, hey, this may happen today. What do we do if this doesn't happen as planned? That way, his brain is already like starting to process the fact that okay, even though I'm anticipating something, it's possible that it may not be there. So it's okay for a child not to have one-on-one support, and maybe as a parent, you can um, talk to your child about it's okay to have help from different people because it's at the end of the day, it's a community. I remember when I was taking my education degree, I said, wow, a classroom is really a microcosm of society. Comes to find out, Dewey said it. I'm like, well, I thought about it without knowing about him, but that's the reality of things. We need to think about what that would look like in the real life. So yeah, one-on-one is good, but when they're an adults, we do want them to be able to do things on their own, if that makes any sense.
Yes, and I would piggyback on that, Miss Berry. That let's not forget, we're trying to prepare them to be citizens in society. In the very end, they have to leave us. And I tell parents and students, depending on how old they are, no matter what your difficulty is, we're trying to help you understand it and be able to manage and cope it. Right, right. So even if it's a behavioral thing, and that's why the student has a one-on-one, are you going to get that for your job? No. So sometimes, and of course, it's a whole process on determining whether one-on-one is required or needed. But if the school has already determined that a one-on-one would be useful and helpful, as everyone was saying, just having your child with one person, it's rough because people get sick, people leave, lives change, and we can't dictate all the time what that adult is going to do for that child because they might not be there. Now, what is your child doing? They're just going to be without anybody, or we're going to have another adult that can support them. That's maybe not their preferred person. We have another question from Facebook from Linda Little. Building relationships is important. What kinds of things should teachers do to build relationships with their parents in order to be able to have these hard conversations about their scholars? And I will start this one off. It's not just incumbent upon the teachers themselves, because guess what? They got a bunch of little scholars. Yes. Parents have a few, right? So it's everybody's job. It's not teachers are required to do this to build relationships. Teachers should be working to build relationships because they have to want to build relationships with their students too. Yeah. Building the relationship with the student is really important, and building relationships with families. So, as we said, we're all family. Everybody has to work on building those relationships. So everybody has to kind of reach out, be open to hearing. Teachers should, be definitely sharing information back and forth on whatever app they use to communicate with their parents, sending information home via their backpacks, or I know in my elementary school they have folders, so checking their folders every night to see what kind of communication the teachers sent home for parents, emails, all of those things. Definitely being available for conferences, back to school nights, being able to share what their philosophy is on teaching, how they manage their classroom. All of those things are really important to help the parents understand what environment their students learn in. But anybody else have anything to add?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I just go ahead. Just to add a little bit to that, I think that my kids are in preschool, but the teacher just sent like an outline of, I am so and so. This is, my background. This is my knowledge. This is my email. I have that sitting there in a pile, knowing that as a parent, I'm so busy, and I'm also, the last minute trying to get something to you as a teacher. But when I have that pile sitting there, I already know the teacher, know their contact information is sitting right there, accessible to me. So at least something like that is beneficial for parents to have. But as we've been discussing, and we're saying, it's from both ends. Parents have to also be willing and be open and available to communicate with the teachers. At the end of the day, it's our kids, our child. So you have to look at it in that aspect. So I truly I commend all teachers that are still teaching and still love their jobs, as we are in a different generation completely, and it's harder than it was 10 years ago. So I just want to say thank you. Linda Little, it sounds like you're most likely a teacher. I just want to say thank you, and thank you to all teachers, because it's not an easy world we're in right now.
Disclaimer, that is my mom, and she was a principal. Bingo question goes to you. You get $25,000.
Oh, I wanted to add, mom. So, specifically for teachers, if you think about it, if you're always calling home for the bad, it doesn't go over well. So build it a part of the rapport to call home for the good. So when you have to say something that's not so great, you already had that foundation. And when you're delivering bad news, do it like a compliment sandwich. Start with something good. Hey, they came to class today. It was a difficult class, and here is what happened. But I want them to continuously be here. So that's why I'm making this call, so we can come up with some type of strategy. So you want to do it as a compliment sandwich. And something my experience is limited to the middle school. My experience has always been in middle school. But getting to know the child and building that positive rapport with the child is usually the first go-to. And you want to find ways to engage them outside of the classroom. So go to the lunchroom if you can for a second. If they participate in a sport, take the extra 5-10 minutes just to pop in and say, hey, good game. Or if they're doing after school club, pop into the after school club, ask them about the after school club. What'd you do over the weekend? Like, nothing about the classroom. Just get to know them as a child. And then that way you're building a rapport with the child. So when you call home, you can say, hey, I know your child. I know what their interests are. I know what the things. So parents already know that you have a vested interest. And two things that you can do to help in the classroom as well: send positive notes home. If you can't make the call, print out a little sheet. If you go on, I don't know if I'm supposed to promote things, but if you go to TPT, look for a PDF, create a good day note home, and just send it home. Take this home to your mom, dad, parent, guardian, whoever is at home. Or you can even be intentional. Okay, I'm going to pick these 5 students and I'm going to look for something good this entire week so that I can go home, and then go through your entire roster. So by the end of the quarter, you should have at least made some positive contact home. So build rapport with the students first. And then when you are calling home, don't always call home for the bad things. Make sure that you're bringing positive notes home as well.
We now have a question from Zoom from Ms. Martin, which is going straight from Ms. Berry. When the teacher said your child was not using materials appropriately, did you try to find out exactly what she meant? How was your child using the materials? I ask this because as an artist, to me, there is no appropriate or inappropriate way of using materials, and maybe the child just was experiencing moments of creativity exploration and the teacher did not understand.
So I had to laugh. I know my child so well. No, I did not try to find out what they meant. It's a Montessori school, so they have a dressing. I don't know what it's called. It's in the form of I'm a math teacher. It's a rectangular prism, and it has the buttons, the shoelaces, and a zipper. 3 sections. So that's where they go to practice how to tie shoes or put on buttons and zippers. So he went inside of it, and whatever he was doing, I happened to be. I didn't know I was, but I happened to be creative, and sometimes it makes me laugh what they say he did or do, because it still happens every now and then. And sometimes I just talk with them like, okay, this is not appropriate. And because it's on the spectrum, what I've learned, or what I've caught myself doing over time, and I've done it with his babysitter, is basically I'm helping him make sense of the world around him. So for example, this is a plant. I show him a picture of a plant. And then outside, let's say there's a bush. He may say there's a plant. I'm like, well, no, it's a little bigger than the plant. So that's a bush. There's a plant, there's a bush. Then he can look at a tree. Oh, that's a bush. No, that's bigger than a bush. That's a tree. So basically, we help him construct his vocabulary by being explicit, which is, I guess, when we talk about explicit instruction in the classroom, that's exactly what it looks like. We happen to have at his school, there was a special education teacher. She would say, well, he would knock down the letters. So she said, well, today I put all the letters on the floor. Look at that. They're all on the floor. Now let's spell. Then they would sit on the floor. And then that's how she got him to do work, knowing how she anticipated what he may do. And she was able to get to where he was at so that she can still get the results that she was looking for. Unfortunately, because I guess the science says we don't know the causes or root causes of autism, it's neurodevelopmental. So it it has to do with how the brain is operating. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a, I mean, I'm not surprised that there's a creativity component in what he does. He is hilarious. And some of what he does, I take with a grain of salt. And when it's really serious, that's when I try to find ways to explain, okay, we can't do this. This is what we can do instead. And that's how we've been navigating this world. And he's an artist too. He likes to draw. Now he makes comic books. I have papers and tons of paper. I can't show it because that I have the background. So I let him express himself. There's paper everywhere. It looks like a junkyard. But if it's gonna help him express himself and be creative, then that's what we're doing. And I happen to be a teacher too, so that kind of helps because it to the previous question, the previous speaker, being a parent of a child with autism, it helps communicate with parents as well. And then what I've done is place phone calls right out the gate. Hey, this is such and such, and I'm your child's teacher. He did something today. He's not in trouble yet. That's my key sentence. He's not in trouble yet, because he's done all this. I know what he's capable of, but I didn't understand this today. So just wanted to bring it up to your attention. So those are some of the things that I do as a teacher based on how teachers have reacted to me with my child. Yeah, thanks for the question.
I do want to circle back to something that was brought up earlier in our panel discussion. 504. So we've been talking a lot about special education, and we kind of sort of said 504s and stated that they are not the same. But can we kind of explain to our viewers what's the difference? And that's for anyone that would like to speak.
I was, before becoming an IEP chairperson, I was a 504 chairperson. So 504s are, so IEPs are about specially designed instruction. Well, I'll start there.
I'm so sorry. Hold on for 1 second. I think the last commenter did come off of mute and wanted to say something. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Holloway.
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
IEP, specially designed instruction, whole plan, series of evaluation, and some sort of diagnoses is eventually put into the plan, like OHI, multiple disabilities, emotional disabilities, specific learning disabilities, so forth and so on. 504s are actually, that was instruction. 504s are really accommodations specific, which they don't necessarily have to even be about classroom learning. For example, if a student is a diabetic, they can get protections under 504 because having diabetes may impact their access to school programming. So as a diabetic, they may have to go and get glucose monitored often, which means they're late to class or not coming to class or whatever that is. And so you want to make sure they're protected from basically being punished for having to deal with that particular, and I hate using the word disability for everything. I think it's sometimes overused, but this unique trait, I'll say that. If a child, we often deal with children with migraines. Students with migraines can miss days of school sometimes. And so that 504 just protects that student from, in some cases, if there's retention on the table, well, they're absent because they have this chronic health impairment. We also do it. Some students who have attention deficit have a 504. There's not the same impact on instruction, but it may be things like how you check on the student while they're working, what kind of environment they work in, and so forth. So the 504 is really about access. We're just saying we've identified that there's some sort of unique trait, or i.e. disability, and this plan is in place to accommodate the needs, the concerns, just the way of life that goes along with having this trait at school. So they can't not participate in sports. You can't keep them out of sports because they're a kid that has diabetes or whatever. They get to have access to everything that the school offers, but there's not a particular part with services and specially designed instruction. And probably Miss Barry or my other special education folk can probably do a better job. I'm giving more of a layman's term explanation.
We appreciate that. That was very good.
My daughter has a 504. She has ADHD inattentive type. So her accommodations look different than a person who has a learning difference and has an IEP. So I'm the 504 coordinator at my school. So a lot of, again, speaking to what you were saying, Dr. Holloway, sickle cell, a lot of one of my students have a heart murmur, just various different, it can vary. And I think that parents need to know they cannot have both. That's what I was coming off to say. You cannot have an IEP and a 504 at the same time. An IEP trumps a 504. And I think that parents, again, when we hear ADHD, you instantly think IEP. You instantly just think that a student is supposed to have an IEP when it actually can be a 504 with those minimal accommodations, frequent breaks, getting maybe the chart or just various things using that prem book, right, to make sure that your accommodations are matching up and that you are not always saying, hey, she has to have access to water, the nurse. Those are things that come with the 504. So we need to make sure that parents are very, very clear that just because you are getting the note from your doctor, which of course it still goes through your doctor or it can go through your school. I was fortunate enough to know that my child needed it in first grade because I saw some inattentiveness. Her attention span was very short. She wasn't able to focus for long periods of time. So it was more so of ensuring that she had those frequent breaks. She was able to get up and ask for breaks. Not only was she able to do that, she also now understands that she needs these accommodations in order to be successful in school. So not only should we explain to our scholars what an IEP is and what a 504 is, we want to make sure they know exactly what they should be receiving and what that looks like for them. And the reason why I say that is because when they get older and we're registering our students, the first thing we ask is, have you heard of anything called an IEP or a 504? Have you been a part of your meeting? And they'll say no. And I think that's not good practice because as they become adult learners and go to college, they need to know that 504 and that IEP can follow them all the way up into college. So it's very important that they know exactly what that document is saying about them and how that document can support them all the way into them being an adult learner.
Well said, panel. Our last topic for discussion for tonight are personal experiences as both educators and parents. So sharing your dual perspectives as educators and parents, and exploring your experiences as both an educator and a parent.
I'll go first again. Well, I was last, but I'll go first now. When I was diagnosed with ADHD, speech language. I had an IEP coming up. My mom was my biggest advocate, which is why I started my business, not only from my mom's standpoint, being a single mom, advocating for me all the way up from third grade to currently. She's still advocating for me because she's advocating for my child. So when you're looking at being a mom and then your child is then diagnosed with something similar, it hits you differently. It just does. It does something to you. It makes you feel like you did something wrong. How did she inherit this trait? I'm an educator. How can this happen to me? You go through all you start spiraling, right? So personally, I've been blessed to create a village around me, not only through Dr. Green, but also through other channels, Jack and Jill, and all these other villages that I have created around myself to ensure that I know that I can be safe as an adult learner, still struggling with having a learning difference, saying, hey, I need you to slow down. I need you to tell me exactly what's going on. I don't understand what you're saying. Can you pause? I need to get up. But then being able to share that with my daughter and or my son and saying, hey, I understand. I see the frustration. So personally, it hits different when you know as a mom, you feel that not only did you feel like your child inherited something from you, but now being able to change my posture and knowing that I'm able to support her differently, right? And I think that as a mom and or a dad in a family or a village around you, you have to be very intentional and vulnerable and say, I am struggling. I don't know what this looks like. And then we move forward. And that means you saying it to your child as well, saying that, hey, mom does not know everything, right? And I think that her knowing that now mom is not the person that knows all the things, we're figuring it out as we go. We have to create that vulnerable space with the educators in the classroom as well, because I know for sure that I am where I am now because I had a strong mom as an advocate. So we have to be very, very intentional in regards to letting not only our families know, but also the educators around us know in the classroom, I struggle with this and I need support in this because I need to support my students. So we need to be just and creating that vulnerable space has been very helpful for me as a mom and as an educator and being the owner of my business. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say for me, I did not birth children, but I raised two children. I moved in with my sister when she had her two boys, and I helped her raise them from birth. Um, and they both have their own disabilities. One has ADHD and depression, and I'm the one to be like, "Hey, ooh, you look like what's going on? These are the things you need to do X, Y, Z." That works with the oldest one with anxiety, ADHD and depression. It did not work with my anxiety friend. It did not. I would tell him the things that I knew, but then he wouldn't ever do it. He'd be like, "Oh, I tried that at one time, Auntie, or I tried that breathing. It didn't work that one time." And so I had to take a step back and be like, "I need you to get some other help because I can't do it. You're stressing me out. You act like I don't know what I'm talking about." But the funniest thing is now they're both adults, 23 and 20, and one is in college. And knowing him informs me of how sometimes I work with my students. I'll be like, "Oh, okay, I got that." And I'll tell him, I'm like, "Guess what? I had a student and this happened." And he's like, "Oh, yeah." And I was like, working with you through high school, which was the roughest time ever, I'm like, I knew exactly how to approach that student. So it really did help me become a better practitioner having them in my life and having gone through that with them.
Um, I'll say I have two daughters who, just based on where we live, have always been in predominantly white spaces. So, as the educator, I have to also be very mindful of the fact that we sometimes do things in education that negatively impact Black girls, Black students in general. So, um, being an educator has allowed me to kind of have an inside view for things when something is questionable, right? So I've been able, by being an educator, to make sure that my kids, and it's sort of a privilege to a degree, that my kids have the right teachers, because I will call and say, um for this schedule, I'm gonna need such and such to be the teacher for this because I already know such and such does not teach well, right? So um I've been able to kind of play, to use that to my advantage. But it's very hard also for me, being a Black female educator in a predominantly white space, especially as an administrator, because I always have to check my tone with things. So even if I see that something may not be right, I have to be very smart about how I approach it. And so it's there's a certain level of, I'll say, um I'll say anxiety that comes with being an educator and a parent, especially in this rural, predominantly white space. Um, Now, I'm grateful that, you know, we've been able to embed ourselves in the community because we've coached kids as well. So, black kids, white kids, everybody knows us, So, my children do, get to kind of move in a way that allows them to be them. But being an educator and a mom in this space, I've had to live basically as understanding how this system can be, but also, and that also makes me very protective. So I'm protective of my own children, but I'm also very protective of the students of color under my care in my school. So advocacy has come out of being a mom and an educator, right? Also, I'll say that being a mom and an educator is very exhausting. Like y'all on here, y'all ain't say y'all was tired not one time. Um it can be very exhausting because you're pouring something into people all the time. Like you wake up, our school starts at 7:30 and you're hugging, you're dapping, you're what's wrong, baby? I'm laying edges, I'm doing all this stuff from 7:30 a.m. to when I come home for my own children or child, and she asking me to do a wrap in her hair or to help take out some braids, and I don't have the energy. And teenagers like to talk late at night. Like I've been asking you how you felt all day, but you decide at 10:51 p.m. that you want to talk about all the things. So having that emotional availability and emotional space is something that is you're grateful that you have children like to talk to you, but it is something that does drain you sometimes. So there is the mom guilt that comes along with being a mother and educator, because you're like, oh, I just did all this for these kids at school and I just sat down and talked to them and talked them through this issue they were having. And then your own kid comes, you're like, can you just go to bed somewhere? Can you please just go and ask your dad to make you that sandwich? So there's there's both privilege in my position as an educator and a mother in the same district as my children, and there's also that extreme like exhaustion and guilt and some of that comes along with it, because if you give like you're supposed to give and people want you to give at work, it is very, very hard to get that extra energy to do to put that same kind of energy into your own children. And I have girls, and girls will tell you about yourself without any kind of filter. So understand, like, there's some hard conversations that I've been able to engage in with my own daughters, because I raised them to speak up, even though sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't raise you to speak up to me because it's hurting my feelings. But but it's teaching me to also understand that work also has to have its own place. And I'll say that to those of you with younger children or whatever, work is going to have its own place, because those little folks in your house with you are the folks that are going to ride or die with you. So just as sort of an auntie kind of thing, your babies in your home are first. We got to compartmentalize, and as hard as it may be, leave that work at work if you can. So
I think that should be a whole nother.
Yes.
Listen, I think that should be a whole nother conversation that Dr. Green needs to go ahead and start, because I do think that it's difficult with having a 3-year-old and 7-year-old. My school starts at 7:10, and I have to get up the road at 5:45 in the morning to take one here. And I appreciate you, Dr. Holloway, for saying that, because you're touched out by the time you get home to be able to be all the things to your little scholar, because you've hugged, you've dapped, you've given all that you have. So kudos to everyone on the call for that, because it is rough being an educator and a parent at the same time, because you're advocating all day long.
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree, and that needs to be a whole nother conversation on its own.
Yes. And just to segue into just my perspective and to answer the 504 and IEP question, it is challenging. I have three little ones, 4, 3, and 2. And I'm a school psychologist. I don't know how I'm doing half of what I do, but we're getting through it. And just exactly what you said, Ms. Holloway, coming home, it's difficult just to pour out to them. So sometimes on the weekend, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna plan and schedule and do this for them so we can have fun, and that way they can know that I'm there. But it's hard. Monday to Friday, it's very difficult to be present for them. I did work with Child Find at one point, and I had families come in. So they come in, they tell you, what's going on with their child, and you kind of problem solve with them. And I had a parent come and described everything about their child that was just like my child. And I told her, me too. No way, me too. And her response was, but you have all the skills and the tools. I said, no, but it doesn't work at home. My skills, my tool set does not work at home. Why? Because it's me giving the support. Had it been me giving your child the supports that they need, they'll understand this is a different person. But if it's coming from me, it's difficult. So then every time my kids go to school, I go to the teacher. This is a list of my child. This is what they can do. This is what they're great at. This is what they're not so great at. How can we get ahead of the game so that these things do not happen? And so I find myself always doing that. And just my kids started a new school, and the teacher was like, oh, I haven't heard anything so far. Behaviors are pretty good. I was like, well, that's good, but keep me posted so that we can work together. But that's kind of been it for me. It's been a big balance between work and home. And I'm excited and talking with families, and I'm so happy to help them get through their hump. And then I'm back home with my hump, and I'm like, what else can we do? So it's tough overall. But a 504 and an IEP are completely two different things, as we shared earlier. An IEP is an individualized education plan in which, so I always give this example. Let's say a child cannot read. Then we have educators who will sit with the child and read with them constantly, repetitively. That way they can build that fluency in reading. So that's kind of what IEP is. Students can get pulled out, they can get supports in that aspect. If a child has social difficulties, they'll get them into a lunch bunch and tell them, say hi to so-and-so, oh, you do this, so that they're giving them explicit, learning in that aspect. For 504 is accommodation. So these are what accommodation, like an extra time on test, or a break card. So some things, for the student, things like that. So that's completely different, but they're both legally binding documents that any parent or anyone can seek for and request information for.
Now, I wanted to add on to that as well. So you can have both. However, if the 504 is not successful, you can have the team determine if the IEP is what's best. And the documentation from that 504 is what you would use in addition to other things. But you can go from a 504 to an IEP, and the strategies that were already suggested in the 504 can be expounded on. So you can move from the 504 to the IEP, and you can also move from the IEP
That's right.
to 504. So you can have both, but depending on what the needs are, you could go back and forth.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. And so we have just a couple more comments from Miss Linda. She wanted to share that often parents are reluctant to approach teachers due to them not knowing how to or what to ask in order to help their children. For that reason, she strongly believes it is extremely important for us as educators to find ways to build relationships which help parents feel both comfortable and welcome in the school. Thank you, Miss Linda, for that information. I agree. Mr. Mia Bond asked, she said that exhausting really resonates. She's a mother, not an educator, but a mother of 3 school-age children. And if there are no learning concerns, how often should she as a parent check in with the teacher?
Still check in. You just want to make sure that the teacher, you and the teacher have that relationship there, that if anything arises, they can reach out to you. So you, in the beginning, 2-3 weeks down the line, you check in again. Just keep checking it. It doesn't hurt at all. It doesn't hurt at all. If you feel like you're doing too much, you're not. It's what your child needs. So just do what you have to do.
And that's a good point, because I think that sometimes when parents feel like their child is doing well, they don't talk at all. They don't say anything. So there are a number of things that I hear my friends say, like, my child's on honor roll, they're always getting citizenship awards. I don't have to go to the school. No, you do, because you want to know why they're doing well, right? Yeah. If they have straight A's, great. But why do they have straight A's? Can you see the grade book? Because a lot of teachers will give these grades because your child is sitting behind, not participating, and they're like, oh, hey, you're doing great. A, participation, and they could be getting all these amazing grades just in participation in itself, but their assessment grades could be very low. So you want to see where the grading scale is as well, to see if they're high on participation or if they are how their grading is going. In addition to that, you want to make sure that at report card time, even though they have all A's, a lot of them are not getting comment section. Where are you seeing that he's strong? Where are you seeing the weaknesses? Is there anything that he can do to increase his grade? Or is this a grade that he's received based on what? What is this A's based on, right? And when you dig deeper into that, the teacher is saying it's based on participation, and article based on that they're doing whatever the curriculum is or whatever that syllabus is. You want to make sure that because they're doing well, what does that actually look like? Because we all want students to do well, but there's always a way to improve.
And in addition to that, this is from a personal background too, to Ms. Wright's credit. If they're doing well, then what accelerated classes can be offered? And a lot of times that might not be provided because they're doing so well. So okay, let's look at what high school credits, if they're in middle school, can they be provided? If they're in high school, what programs can I start looking at to prepare them for college? I know for me personally, my mom thought I was doing well, so she's like, well, I'm gonna put you in IB since you're doing so well. But that's not something that would necessarily be offered to certain students, and so you want to think about how can I even more explore like the strengths that they have. So go up there and ask, what programs can I get involved in? My child is doing well.
I think Miss Linda agreed too. She said, how are the straight A students being challenged? So that is a really
one thing. I'll just quick parenthesis. At my school, my co-teacher, he's the math teacher, I'm the special education teacher, he posts on Class Dojo, so I think he has gone viral. But he will say, oh, this is what we're doing during the 7th grade class, but we're teaching them 8th grade lessons in tutoring. Some parents are scratching their heads, but what he's really doing is the unit right now is in proportional relationships, but in 8th grade, the unit that matches that is slope and intersect, which is literally proportions. So he would say those things so that parents know that, okay, even though they're on grade level, if they come to tutoring, we'll be doing 8th grade work. So that's another way to engage parents and have them come, even though, have the students. And the days we have students who show up who happen to be behind on other lessons, maybe I'm working with them and then he's working with those other students on the higher level standards or skills. Those are ways that we can balance the two.
Yes. Thank you, panelists. This has been an amazing discussion. And even Ms. Ramaberry says thank you from Canada and is looking forward to the discussion on parenthood and work balance that I think Dr. Green should be definitely coming up with. So parents and viewers, thank you for joining us. There are additional town halls that will be given by Dr. Green, and you can probably find those on her Instagram. They will be on a wealth of different topics, and hopefully pretty soon how to manage working and parenthood. Thank you for joining us, parents, panelists. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge in this really, really deep and profound conversation that we were able to have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great meeting you all too. Loved it.
Likewise.
Awesome, guys. Awesome. Makeda, you got to get us all together. This is all your fault because now I'm amped up and ready to go to work. I done had coffee this late at night, and now I'm ready to teach them how to, and I can't.
No,
So.
well, we have one last question from Miss Linda. She wants to know, how are the straight A students being challenged? You already answered.
Got answered.
We answered it.
That's wonderful. That's great.
And I will take.
I look like an Apple store here, managing.
But Miss Linda did want to remind people, get out and vote. Make sure you vote.
Mhm.
Yes, please make sure that you go out and vote. We are so thankful for everyone being here. Just like everyone else, my tiny human is sleeping right now, right here. And he was quiet. Don't get up now. He was quiet the whole time. And I am so happy that everyone was able to come on. This was a very fervent, energetic conversation that we needed to have on education, on parenting, families, balancing everything with our learners at home to our learners at school, and being able to just balance it all as moms, momties, god momties, aunties, the rich aunties, everyone, everything and everyone to everyone. And most importantly, we have to be able to pour back into ourselves, which is everyday challenge for all of us. But we need to. I would like as a charge for us to take this conversation into our networks, into our communities, into our neighborhoods, into our families, because it is necessary. As we've seen, there are only small components of education being discussed within the election cycle. Unfortunately, a lot of education components are in the local elections. So we need to continue this conversation because our families, our students, our clients, and us as educators, psychologists, counselors, teachers, administrators are impacted by local elections and what they say in the local school boards. So please go out and vote. Ms. Linda, thank you so much for telling everyone to go out and vote. Please go out and vote. Please vote. In Maryland, you can actually do same day voting. So you can like register to vote and vote on the same day, apparently. So please go out and vote, and please make sure that you're being cognizant of your of the voting laws and all of that in your areas. And we will see you all again. Our next panel is going to be on Wednesday, October 30th, discussing mental health and moms. But we will have a separate discussion on parenthood and work because that seems to be a whole situation. Myself,
I think it's more so about educators, work-life balance for educators, teachers.
yes,
Moms, yes, but as educators, what that looks like on a wider. I mean, we can go deeper into that. I think that should be. We can go deeper, but I think that also we need to have that conversation with. As we have Dr. Holloway, who's a principal. However, I think those conversations need to be had in a broader.
That is true. That is true. Because during COVID, we had a lot of mental health care professionals were talking about compassion fatigue just amongst like mental health professionals. But I feel like compassion fatigue could be stretched across educators as well. Just, hearing all the things that Dr. Holloway said that we do. I didn't even remember that we are laying edges and making sure that they look cute before.
And don't forget them out your lunchbox too.
Yes. Okay. And I've had the pleasure of working with all of these people in colleagues and passing and parallels and also direct. So I can say that I can attest to the fact that they do say what they're saying right now. And they are true to who they are. And this is all genuine right here. So we thank you again. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your conversation. Thank you to the panelists. I truly appreciate this. This is a labor of love that has been gratifying in a lot of ways. And yeah, I thank you. So until next time, until Wednesday, take care for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.